Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to this webinar on the safe alternative to sending email attachments and Hexiosec Transfer. We're joined today by Helen from Jisc Licensing and also by Rich Young, our Principal Solutions Architect, who is the engineering lead for Hexiosec Transfer and will be demonstrating the platform. So what I'll be talking about today is the risks involved with email and email attachments in particular, how there is a better way, and what end-to-end encryption is and how it's becoming the gold standard in protecting sensitive data. Then I'll hand over to Rich, who will be talking about Hexiosec Transfer and walking you through some of its features. There'll be a Q&A at the end. Feel free, please, to drop any questions into the chat as we go along, and we'll address them at the end. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to Helen from Jisc to introduce herself and share a little bit about the CHEST agreement. Hi, Helen.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Helen Thackeray. I'm from the licensing team at Jisc, and I work with Hexiosec on this agreement. Jisc licensing agreements are available via the CHEST platform, and these agreements are designed specifically for UK and Ireland education and research sectors. The Hexiosec agreement is available to purchase. There is an exclusive discount buying through CHEST. We use Jisc banded bands for pricing, and it's fixed pricing for 3 or 5 year terms. I'll pop a link in the chat, and it's back to you, David.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm David Griffiths. I'm the CEO of Hexiosec, and just a little bit about us first. We're a UK company. We're based in Cheltenham. We have deep roots in cybersecurity and a team with a strong background in UK government and the defence industry. We work directly with organisations to help them understand their exposure and make sense of their risk and prioritise what matters. We're very proud to be part of the CHEST agreements, making it easier for higher education, further education, to get access to our tools at discounted rates. Transfer is Hexiosec Transfer is a simple and secure way to share files, both internally but particularly externally. Really, that's where it's aimed for, with end-to-end encryption, and it's been approved by use for by central government. We have a number of government departments as customers. And really what it's addressing is one of the big issues in cyber security. It's always been the case, really, but it's particularly recently, is that of email and email attachments. They remain really one of the biggest sources of unintentional data exposure. And we all know of high-profile examples like the Afghan military of defence sending, the Ministry of Defence sending information about the Afghan people unintentionally. And I think that was although it was a hidden sheet, I believe, in the spreadsheet, really part of the problem really is the fact that it was sent over email. And the problem with email is, I mean, obviously it's generally not encrypted, but other features of it really, I mean, once it's sent, you can't undo it. You can't say, oh, I want to retract that email. It's very easy for emails to get forwarded, and then for emails to get shared with people that you didn't intend for them to get shared with. Effectively, you lose control. Also, emails hang around in inboxes for a very long time, and if anyone's like me, I mean, I've emails going back many years. Then there are practical things like the size of attachments, the limitation on that, really. So email attachments, but they are so ubiquitously used, and often they are used to send data that can be quite sensitive. There are alternatives, obviously, but they do come with their own risks. I mean, SharePoint folders, for example, if you want to share data with someone outside your organization, you might use the SharePoint folder. But there is a setup overhead with them, and it's quite easy to configure them wrongly and forget that shares exist. And when we talk to the NCSC, they kind of say, the thing about SharePoint is the blast area is quite large. Essentially, if you have lots and lots of shares set up and you misconfigure something, then the amount of exposure that could generate could be quite large. Other third-party tools you can use, like, for example, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and so on, these are generally not end-to-end encrypted, which means that you are exposing your data to those providers. And they might be using it to train AI. In fact, WeTransfer kind of changed their policy recently, particularly for that effect. So they were allowed to do it. They're quite big aggregators of data. So they become quite a big target for attackers. And they might promise not to look at your data, but they can't promise that they won't get hacked. And it doesn't really help if they say it's encrypted at rest, because if they have the keys, then if they get hacked, then that data is still exposed. So universities, colleges, and research organizations particularly handle huge volumes of sensitive data, whether it's student records, research data, legal, contractual material, collaboration with the industry partners. Really is quite a lot. And all of that sensitive materials sits within a specific regulatory and governance environment. And institutions need to increasingly demonstrate that they have they apply GDPR and DPA controls. They have good retention policies and audit trails and things like this, just to kind of make sure that they are handling data securely and respecting people's privacy. So really, we built Hexiosec Transfer on the back really of our own dissatisfaction with products in the marketplace, which tend to be either not very secure or awkward to use, and sometimes both. So really, with the aim of Hexiosec Transfer is to allow frictionless communication with people outside your organization in a bi-directional sense. So you can send files and data to them and you can request it from them as well. And also to have uncompromised end-to-end encryption. And what end-to-end encryption means is that only the sender and the intended recipient can ever see the unencrypted data. So no one else gets access to the cryptographic keys that are needed to read the data. So Microsoft can't read it, Google can't see it, and with Hexiosec Transfer, we cannot read the data as well. And this means, it's very important because it means that the data remains private and is not vulnerable to the provider, in this case us, having access to it. And if we were to get breached, or Microsoft get breached, whoever it is that you're sharing the data via, then that data can become public. There are some solutions that claim end-to-end encryption, but they sometimes rely upon the keys being sent to their servers, and that's not end-to-end. And others will claim that, well, it's fine because things are encrypted in transit and at rest, but that doesn't mean that they haven't got access to that data. So this is the key thing about end-to-end encryption, is it provides 100% privacy, and it really does mean that you're not exposing yourself to that third party being breached. There's lots of other things in Hexiosec Transfer which will allow more control of the data when you're sharing it with people. And really, this is something that Rich will be going into when he shows the demo. So you're ready, Rich, so over to you. And, okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yes, so I will be going through a demonstration of Hexiosec Transfer for the remainder of this webinar, with a brief portion of Q&A at the end. So I'll just give it a moment for the demonstration to come on screen, and then I'll get started. So what we're going to go through today is a couple of examples of using transfer, both to send data from inside an organization, and then also to get data into an organization from an external party. So I'm going to start off with a really simple example, sending some files using Hexiosec Transfer. So what I'll do is I'll sign into the product, and then I will click on Share Files. And what I'm going to do now is set up the settings for this transfer. So I've given it a description so that I can go back into my history of transfers and see what I've sent. And then I'm also going to set some expiry and maximum view conditions as well, which goes back to what David said about ensuring that Once things have been sent, they're only allowed to basically go so far and only allowed to exist for so long. So in this case, we're going to send some files with an expiry of 5 days and a maximum number of views of 3. So if either of those conditions are met, access to those files is then removed. So I've set those values, I'll click next, and what I'm going to then do is add some files to this transfer. This can be basically anything. We support some very, very large files in Hexiosec Transfer, but as an example, I'm going to add some sensitive documents like some identity information. So I can add as many files as I like. They will be zipped together before being encrypted on my device before being uploaded to our services. So I click next, those files have been encrypted, and that then gives me a link I can share with my recipients. In the vast majority of cases, I'd probably choose to send this to the recipients via email. So let's go and see what this looks like. If I click share via email, what that's going to then do is pop open a Outlook window or any of the default mail clients that are available with a pre-formatted set of text that includes the link and includes a sharing code as well to provide access to that shared data. And what I'm also going to do in this case is add a recipient. So this email will get to them, top and tail it as I normally would, and then add any extra formatting. So in this case, it's a slightly automated email in that the content of it has been generated by our service, but it's still fundamentally an email from myself to my chosen recipients. So as I say, I've topped and tailed it. I'm going to add some formatting, show that there's a section in there which is generated, and then send that off to my recipients. So as a recipient of a Hexiosec Transfer link, what does that look like? Well, here's a new window. I'm going to paste that link in, or I could have clicked it, and this is the page I am presented with. The verify step I'll come on to in the next part of the demonstration, but importantly, before anything is downloaded to the recipient's device, there is a chance to preview what that information is. Now, this is important because as a recipient, I don't really want a website to automatically download anything to my device that I might not be expecting. So this gives me a chance to preview what that information is, see that this is a selection of files of 3 identity files that, from previous conversations, I would probably be expecting to receive from this sender. So having previewed them, I've decided I trust that, and I can click next to download those files to my device, and they will appear in the standard download location from the browser. So that was a very quick example of the simple case of sending files from Hexiosec Transfer. If I wanted to recall that information, so in the case where I've sent something, either it's been received enough times or I no longer want it to be able to be received, I can go in and expire it before those other conditions are met. So it's a simple case of finding that transfer, going into the record and clicking expire. And then even though the previous conditions have not been met, it is now no longer possible to download that content anymore. So that is one of the main benefits that Hexiosec Transfer offers over and above email. What I'm now going to demonstrate is some of the additional security features that we offer on top of just the basic case that I've done in the demonstration so far. So in this case, I'm going to do a secure message. Now, a secure message is very, very similar to sharing files. Just in this case, it's just plain text instead of files. So as before, I've added a description to that transfer, so I know what it is and I can go back into it and, if needs be, recall it. I'm going to leave the expiry conditions at 7 days and 5 views, but I'm going to do a couple of extra things. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a password. Now, I don't have to specify the password at this stage. I can do that in the next step. And also, one of the useful things to know about a password is it doesn't actually improve the encryption in any way. It's just as secure without it. But if I had like a separate communications channel with a recipient, like a Signal chat or a WhatsApp group, I could put that password in there and then send the link through a separate means to ensure that I've got some trust that if my recipient knows the password, I've authenticated that person through a separate trusted channel. So that's the main benefit of adding a password. The other thing I can do to ensure it goes to the right person is require that that person verifies their email address. Now, the first case where I downloaded files, I didn't have to prove who I was. In this case, I will. And not only that, I'm going to limit this to a set of recipients, so only those people can download it, which provides a little bit of protection against forwarding emails containing links. Otherwise, those people will be able to download it as well. So I've put in an address of mine that I know I can use for this demonstration. And the next bit I'm going to do is add the details of that secure message. Now, for this example, it might just be some financial information. So, for example, this is an account number. And the next thing I'm going to do is generate a password. Now, I could type in a password. It is available on the next step, so I can always get back to that password. In this case, I'm just going to generate one for simplicity. And then I'll click upload. Once that information is uploaded, again, I'm presented with a link that allows me to share that information with my recipient. And also on that previous page, it did show me where I could retrieve that password from if I then wanted to copy it to another chat. So what does this look like when a recipient receives a link with those options turned on? Well, as I mentioned before, that verify section is now active. And the first thing I'm going to do is verify my email address. So I'm going to type in the address that I configured to be one of the allowed recipients of this particular transfer and click Get Code. In the background, that's going to send me a code that I can enter from my email client, which will prove I am in possession of that address. This is valid for 7 days. So if I'm doing a lot of sharing with someone, that person doesn't have to verify each time so long as they use the same browser. And now, once I've verified who I am, I just need to put in the password to access this particular download. So I can paste that in from, for example, a Signal chat. And once it's passed those verification steps, it actually shows me the preview of what's in that transfer. It's probably important to note at this point that that preview was not available to someone who hasn't verified that they've got access to this transfer. So we don't reveal anything about shared data until we're absolutely sure that the recipient is going to pass all of the required steps in order to access that information. In this case, it's a secure message, so I'm happy to click next and see what was in it. So there we go. In this case, it's taken me through to my message with that account number in it. So those two examples were for sending data out of an organization. One of the things that led us to develop Hexiosec Transfer was the need to get information back in. So this is why we added the request files feature. And I'm going to set up a sharing request in a similar way to how I set up the transfer for sending data out. So I'll give it a subject. I'm going to set a deadline because I'd like to restrict a time beyond which I don't want to accept further submissions. And then I'm going to click next, and that will give me a link in a similar way as it did for a transfer. Now, obviously, I can click share via email, or I can copy that link wherever I like. But what does that then look like for someone who's in receipt of one of those sharing links? Well, once they've pasted it into their browser or clicked on it from their email client, they're presented with a very similar page to what you would have already seen whilst I was uploading files. The difference here is it shows that subject to the recipient of the link, so it gives them some context as to why those files are being requested, and it also shows who is requesting the files. So in this case, it shows that it's being requested by me with my hexiosec.com email address. And then I can upload as many files to this as I like. So I'm going to use the same identity information as before. So first example, I've uploaded a passport scan, and I can also go back into that and submit even more files to it if I need to, up until the point that deadline is reached. So I've gone through, added 2 separate files to this. Now let's see how that looks like from the perspective of the owner of that link. So I can go back into the tool, go back into my inbox, and I can see my identity document sharing request has been completed, and there's 2 files attached to it. I can still get that link if I needed to send it to anyone else, but now I've got some files there, that's probably what I'm back in the tool to access. So as an example, I can download that passport scan, that comes into my browser downloads. Maybe I don't need the bank statement and I can just delete that without ever accessing it. It's not just the deadline which prevents access to the sharing requests. If needs be, I can archive it as well, which prevents further uploads. and also hides those uploaded documents. If needs be, I can go back in and unarchive that request and access any information that is in there. One thing that's important to note at this point, files are valid for 30 days from the point they're uploaded to a sharing request. So you can see, even though the sharing request was created on a certain date, that passport scan is going to have an expiry as well. And as the requester of that information, it's up to me to download that within that time frame as well. So the key feature of Hexiosec Transfer is that we don't let information live in it forever. It's not a backup tool. It's something that we explicitly want to make sure that beyond a certain expiry point, the file data is no longer available. And then what I want to go on to next is how this works from within our Outlook add-in. So I'm going to start off by doing a completely standard email. I'm going to set my recipient, add a subject as I normally would, and then attach some files to that. And as I'm going through doing this, the key point to note is this is no different to creating a email as I normally would. So I'm adding the files through the standard features of Outlook, and there they are. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Hexiosec Transfer plugin. Once that's loaded, it will then import all of those attachments into the tool. I can go through and set the expiry conditions and maximum views as I would have done previously. The additional feature that this gives you, which speeds things up a bit, is the email verification and the recipient list are linked to what you would put into the email in Outlook. So if I click require email verification and limit recipient list, it will limit it to just those people in the to list of the email. And this is all done from within Outlook. If I chose to add even more attachments to this email, they would be imported into the plugin as well. And the important thing here is those attachments are then not sent unencrypted. They are removed from the email body and added to Hexiosec Transfer. Once I've selected all of the files that I want to add, I click Upload, and then I can finish crafting my email, and at a certain point I can add that snippet of the sharing information into the email ready to send. And then, as I normally would, finish writing that email, and then I can send it off to my recipients. Okay, so that was a brief tour of all of the features of Hexiosec Transfer. That's all I wanted to go through in the demo today. So back to you, David. David, I think your microphone is still muted.
I'm always doing that. Thank you, Rich. Not had any questions, but I know that one that is commonly asked, if you could answer this, Rich, which is how I know that you can set this up to have your own branding. So what is it that is required of an organization in order to set it up, and what does that entail?
Absolutely. So the version of Hexiosec Transfer that we're offering through Jisc at present is our enterprise version, and that is fully branded and white labeled for that organization, which means a couple of things. Firstly, you can have it hosted on a domain name of your choice. So typically it'd be a subdomain of your main sort of business domain. We support adding a logo to the top of the product, so that would replace where we put Hexiosec Transfer as our logo in the header. The product then sort of carries like a specific name. So I don't know, as an example, you would have XYZ Transfer as an example white labeled version of the product. And then in addition to that, we support a light and a dark theme depending on what colors support your brand best. And then the primary color of the user interface for Transfer is usually orange. We can customize that to any particular business's need. We also support things like single sign-on, particularly Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, and other common providers, which, to be honest, we prefer doing because it means we have then less user information to maintain and it is more secure.
Fantastic. So there's just last couple of things to say before we go. We have got quite a few new features coming to Transfer in the new year. There's a blog on our website that talks about that. It'll actually include ability to completely end-to-end encrypted all the way through, but it will include forms, so you could send a form to someone and get them to fill in a structured request effectively. Spaces where you'll be able to kind of store data for, not permanently, but a folder where people can share information and drop files into. Just a different way of sharing, really. Another one also will be secure email, where we encrypt the body of the message as well. So that's all to look forward to in the new year. And the last thing to say is that we have via the Chest agreements a 30-day free trial. Anyone wishing to just try it fully featured for 30 days, please do get in contact via the Chest agreement. Helen's put a link in the chat, and I think do they just email? Is that the way it works? Email you, Helen, and or would they be better getting straight in contact with us?
I've just put my email address in the chat, so
Excellent.
anyone
Fantastic.
that is interested, drop me an email.
Because that's very straightforward to set up, and I say you can use it fully featured for 30 days. So thank you very much for attending, and if you do want to get in contact, just go to our website and you can put in anything there, and we'll get back to you. But thank you very much for attending, and we'll be sending out a video of this to you afterwards, and it will also be available from our website as well. Thank you very much, and have a good day, everybody.